We are not horses. We are humans. And humans are... You still have faith in people.
Continuing the story in Squid Game Season 3, after a failed attempt at rebellion, most of the players who'd left the dorms got killed, leaving just one survivor, Jun-suk. Player 246, one guard, in an unusual move, spared his life after scanning his chip and realizing he was marked as an eliminated player. While they were hauling off the bodies, another guard quietly tagged one corpse as useful, hinting there were still organs they could harvest. He even volunteered to help out in the operating room, trying to earn some brownie points with his bosses. Meanwhile, back in the dorms, the players were shocked when one of the coffins brought in by the guards suddenly revealed Gi-hun, still alive. Cho Hyun-ju checked his pulse, giving the group a tiny glimmer of hope. At the same time, a team of detectives was scouring the seas for the island from a ship. Their captain shrugged off the alarm about strange noises and missing people, blaming it on one of the agents being supposedly drunk. But another detective found the whole thing suspicious. The missing person, the drone operator, was still nowhere to be found. Even though they figured he might have fallen overboard, they decided to keep searching. Gi-hun eventually woke up all disoriented, and when he learned how many had died, he was crushed. Later, the guards announced to the players that only 60 contestants remained, and the prize money had jumped up to 39.6 billion won. Gi-hun, frustrated, confronted the guards, demanding to know why they'd let him live. In a weird moment, he stepped right in front of one of their guns, begging the guard to shoot him, but his fellow players pulled him back. Meanwhile, up in his office, In-ho, the guy running the whole operation, got a call from the captain of the ship. He ordered him to stall the detectives until the games were over. Later on, they held another vote to decide if the game should keep going. This time, they were voting in reverse order. Gi-hun, player 456, was supposed to go first, but he didn't cast a vote at all, so his turn got skipped. Even so, the process kept rolling with the rest of the players. After that, a group led by player 100 started accusing Gi-hun of rigging everything to get rid of the others. Not long after, Seong-nyo, player 44, got up in his face and threw some harsh words his way, blaming him for all the deaths. June, all worked up, tried to attack her, but the others held him back. Over in the operating room, Yul, the guard who'd saved Jun-seok, pretended to go along with the illegal organ harvesting, but then she ripped off her mask, revealing who she really was, and shocked everyone by opening fire on the people there. After shooting the guys involved, she faced off with her superior and confessed the real reason she'd escaped from the north. She'd been trying to find him. She told him he reminded her a lot of her old commander, the same man she'd ended up shooting too. After a short laugh from the man, Yul shot him right in the forehead, ending his life on the spot. Then she ordered the remaining doctor to try and save Seok, who was badly injured. Back in the dorms during mealtime, the players were arguing about who was really to blame for the recent deaths. Everyone seemed to agree that player 388 Daeho was responsible, since he'd been sent to get more ammo and never came back, leaving the group totally defenseless. Meanwhile, on the ship, detectives Junho and Woo-seok kept digging into the mysterious disappearance of the drone operator. Woo-seok was suspicious of the captain, remembering he'd seen him wandering around with a screwdriver in the middle of the night. Even though Junho defended the captain, saying the guy was solid and had even saved his life once, Woo-seok couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. In the end, he decided to stay behind off the boat to investigate on his own, because his talk with Junho had left him rattled. Over on the island, the next game kicked off. The players were escorted out of the dorms, and as they moved down a hallway, they stumbled on the bodies of their fallen teammates hanging up like some twisted decoration. A voice warned them that would be the fate of anyone who dared go against the progress of the game. For this round, the players had to pull a colored ball from a machine to find out which team they'd be on, red or blue. The red team's job was to kill the blue team using knives. Meanwhile, the blue team would get chains and keys they could use to unlock rooms and hide, but once a door was opened, it couldn't be shut again. The whole setup sparked instant outrage. Some players shouted in protest at how brutal the game was, while others were freaking out at the thought of being split up from the people they cared about. A mother, Gyum-ha, got separated from her son, Young-sik, sparking huge tension between them both. At the same time, No-yul stepped up to donate blood to save Young-seok, who was on the brink of death from massive blood loss. As the game kept going, a bunch of players started switching teams to avoid having to kill anyone. Nam-gyu, who'd been assigned to the red team, tried to team up with Myung-gi, praising him for having killed Thanos. Meanwhile, Myung-gi was busy trying to talk Jun-hee into changing sides, promising he'd protect her and her baby if she didn't want to kill. Daeho ended up facing off with Gi-hun, who stared at him with resentment. Daeho accused Gi-hun of blaming him for the past deaths, but insisted he wasn't at fault. He'd just failed to make it back in time. Young-sik traded places with his mom to protect her, begging her to hide well until everything was over. Jun-hee, who was pregnant, started feeling pain and struggling to walk. Jum-ha stepped in to help her. Deciding to stick by her side, Hyun-ju joined them too, determined to keep them both safe. In the end, Gi-hun made up his mind. He was gonna face Nam-gyu in the game no matter what it cost him. The tension between them was through the roof, and a showdown was clearly about to go down. The doctor told No-Eul that Seok was finally stable. Even though the man, terrified, begged her not to kill him, she wasted no time and took him out anyway. But the second she noticed Seok starting to stir and wake up, something shifted in her face. She leaned in close and whispered that she'd help him get out alive. Her coldness turned into a different kind of resolve. Saving him had suddenly become part of her mission. Meanwhile, out in the hallways, the red team was starting their hunt. Armed and laser-focused, they pushed forward, determined to track down and wipe out the blue team, sticking to the game's brutal rules. Somewhere else in the building, Hyunju tried unlocking a door with her key but found it didn't fit. She asked Junhee for hers, but that one didn't work either. That's when they realized that if they combined all 3 keys, including Jumha's, they could form one big keyring able to open any door. They agreed Hyunju should carry all the keys so the group could move faster and escape if they needed to. Meanwhile, Gi-hun was moving solo, dead set on finding Daeho. In one of the hallways, he managed to corner a blue team player, but when he saw it wasn't the guy he was looking for, he let him go. Then, looking into a room, Gi-hun spotted Daeho lurking in the shadows. In that moment, his mind was made up. He wasn't gonna stop until he faced him. Elsewhere, Myunggi and Namgyu had tracked down player 235. Just as Namgyu was about to kill him, Myunggi suggested they do it together. That way, both of them could move ahead in the game at the same time. The guy agreed, and in perfect sync, they took player 235 out. That brutal teamwork quickly became their go-to tactic. Not long after, Hyunju, Junhee, and Gyumha were spotted by someone from the red team. Without hesitating, they took off running. While trying to escape, they had to race up a set of stairs, but Junhee slipped and twisted her ankle, collapsing to the floor and unable to move. Gyumha rushed back for her, and Hyunju didn't even think twice before stepping up to fight off the attacker chasing them. After a fast but fierce fight, she managed to take him down. Myunggi and Namgyu pulled the same deadly move on another victim, securing their place further in the game. Their cold-blooded precision was making them more dangerous by the minute. Meanwhile, the 3 women managed to hide in a room. There, they checked how bad Junhee's injury was. Her ankle was completely shattered. With a trembling voice, she begged them to leave her behind, insisting she'd only slow them down, but both women flat out refused. The bond they shared was stronger than any selfish survival plan. That's when Junhee started showing signs of going into labor. Amid the pain, tension, and sheer panic, she ended up giving birth right there in the room. The baby's arrival, in the middle of all that violence and chaos, was as miraculous as it was heartbreaking. The brief calm was shattered when a player from the red team found them. Hyunju once again didn't hesitate and stepped up to face him. In another fierce fight, she managed to kill him, protecting the new mother and her newborn baby. But her courage came at a brutal price. Just as she made it back to her friends, Hyunju was stabbed from behind. The attacker was Myunggi, who'd been secretly watching them. But after seeing that Junhee had already given birth, he suddenly felt like he'd been doing the wrong thing and just walked away, leaving the 3 women behind without bothering to finish them off. In his eyes, his mission was done. The 2 remaining women wept bitterly over the loss of their friend. Meanwhile, Gi-hun finally managed to corner Daeho, just like he'd been determined to do. Seething with bottled-up rage and desperate for justice, he lunged at him. He pinned him down and, in a merciless act, strangled him to death. With that, Gi-hun closed the chapter on his personal quest for vengeance. On the other side of the building, Gyumha and Junhee, carrying the baby, made it out of the room. They moved cautiously, but as they passed through a doorway, they were suddenly confronted by young Sik, Gyumha's son. Shaken, with a vacant stare and trembling hands, young Sik confessed to his mother that he had to kill her. If he didn't, he'd end up dying instead. Gyumha, shattered inside, tried to talk sense into him, but the weight of the game and the threat hanging over his life were too much. In a desperate and heartbreaking moment, she stabbed him before he could make a move. Young Sik collapsed to the ground, shocked and wounded. Unable to fully grasp what had just happened, his mother fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably, devastated by the fact that she'd hurt her own son. The gods, seeing that young Sik was still breathing but gravely injured, stepped in right away. Without a shred of compassion, they shot him to put him out of his misery and officially eliminate him from the game. Gyumha, frozen in place, remained on the floor while Junhee clutched her baby tightly. Exhaustion, horror, and utter despair were written all over their faces. They were no longer just fighting to survive a twisted game. They were battling the emotional wreckage of every choice they'd been forced to make. While collecting the bodies for processing, a guard was caught off guard by a player who was still showing signs of life. The attacker, clutching a sharp object, nearly managed to stab him badly, but was taken down by a well-aimed shot from a female guard. The danger was over. Relieved, the guard pulled off his mask, followed by his partner, who tried to stay upbeat despite what had just happened. Not long after, 2 more guards showed up, reporting that they'd just taken out another player in a nearby area. Up on the higher levels, there were still bodies that could belong to players who might be alive. Armed with that info, the group set off immediately. Meanwhile, Myung-gi realized he no longer had the necklace he'd taken from Thanos. Inside it were the pills that gave him a rush of euphoria. Panicking, he bolted toward the entrance to the game area, begging the guards to let him go back for it. But his request was shot down. The orders were crystal clear. Furious, Myung-gi started struggling against the guards who tried to restrain him. Suddenly, a baby's cry cut through the chaos. The whole place fell silent. Gyum-ha and Jun-hee emerged, holding the newborn baby in their arms. They'd managed to survive the previous stage of the game. The atmosphere turned somber and heavy with uncertainty. Even Myung-gi looked stunned by the sight. Nobody knew how to react. Somewhere else, No-ul was coming out of the operating room with Yoon-seok, who couldn't figure out why she was helping him. Without giving him much of an answer, she simply told him he'd have to do exactly what she said if he wanted to stay alive. The prize money kept growing as more players were eliminated. In a private lounge, the game's sponsors gathered together. One of them shared how thrilled he was to finally participate in person after years of just watching from the sidelines. The leader revealed that his presence was thanks to a special invite from Nam-il, which sparked a toast in his honor. A guard requested an audience with the leader, reporting that the control center wasn't responding. He was ordered to go check it out himself. Meanwhile, Detective Woo-seok was telling Jun-ho that after digging around in the village, nobody seemed to know the so-called captain of the ship. Suspicion was definitely on the rise. The detective, for his part, launched a drone toward a nearby island and instructed Woo-seok to keep a close eye on the captain. Another vote was called among the players: keep going or split the prize. The majority voted to continue. Desperate, Jung-ha offered to give up her share of the money if it meant saving the baby. She pleaded for a chance for him, but her request fell on deaf ears, leaving Gi-hun visibly shaken. In-ho ordered soldiers to be sent to the operating room to identify the bodies. Meanwhile, No-eul was giving Yoon-seok precise instructions on how to act without raising any red flags. The vote wrapped up with 16 players choosing to keep going. Gi-hun's vote was once again void because he refused to decide. Soon the disappearance of guard number 16 was discovered, who turned out to be the surgeon in disguise. Security footage showed someone else now wearing the uniform. It was Yoon-seok. An immediate search order was issued. Out at sea, Jun-ho recognized an island where he'd been attacked before. He demanded the captain steer closer, even though the guy resisted. Eventually, Jun-ho went ashore, confirming his suspicions. His boss told him to head back later with reinforcements. Back at the base, No-eul appeared behind her superior, pointing a gun at him. She demanded clearance to patrol with Guard 16 and asked for a boat. Though her superior hesitated, he handed over the key. He also ordered another inspection of the operating room, suspecting something was off. He even raised the possibility that player 246 might be hiding under the missing guard's uniform. Inside the dorm, the lights suddenly came on. Guards entered carrying a coffin. To everyone's shock, they were removing the lifeless body of Jung-ha, who had hanged herself during the night. While going through the captain's belongings, Woo-seok found a photo of him standing next to the recruiter. That confirmed a direct link to the games. Not long after, a Rottweiler came charging in, acting all aggressive. It attacked the captain, forcing him to shoot the dog. Woo-seok also discovered a container full of cash and an official guard uniform, backing up Jun-ho's story. But before he could do anything else, the cops showed up and arrested him. A new game was starting. The players were led out into the arena. Jun-hee, unsure of what to do with the baby, decided to bring him along. Gi-hun offered to help her and promised he'd keep them both safe. She admitted she was terrified of being alone, and that even though she thought having the baby would give her life meaning, it had actually done the opposite. In a private lounge, the VIPs were debating whether to place bets on Jun-hee. One of them said he'd already bet on her, though by accident because he'd been drunk at the time. The new game was jump rope, but this wasn't any ordinary rope. It swung around with brutal force. The players had to decide the jumping order themselves. Nam-gyu, suffering from withdrawal, begged another player to give him back his necklace. The guy tossed it across the bridge instead, forcing Nam-gyu to go after it. Driven by desperation, he ended up being the first one to give it a shot. When Nam-gyu finally grabbed the necklace, he opened it up and found it empty. Stunned and confused, he got smacked by the rope and was sent flying into the void. Gi-hun made the crossing while carrying the baby. It was tough at first, but he managed to get the hang of it and made it safely to the other side. His bravery drew applause from the VIPs. From across the arena, he shouted that he'd come back for Jun-hee. Another player made it over, and once safe, started shoving people off as they arrived, claiming he was just trying to secure his own victory. Furious, Gi-hun demanded to know what the hell he was doing. But the other guy's selfishness made it painfully clear that for many, this game was nothing but pure survival, no matter the cost. The challenge of jumping rope while crossing the bridge keeps going, taking the brutality and emotional strain to a whole new level. Player number 96 takes it upon himself to wipe out anyone who makes it across the bridge, hoping to gain a big advantage for himself. The number of players keeps shrinking fast. Some fall trying to jump the rope, while others get eliminated by number 96. He tells Gi-hun that if the two of them manage to be the last one standing, they'll have a better shot at making it out alive because during the vote, they can both press the X option and leave with the money. But Gi-hun flat out refuses to go along with that that plan. As time ticks on, the bridge crossing grows more chaotic. While the millionaire bettors watch the spectacle with even more excitement, Gi-hun begs player 96 to stop trying to kill off the other players and threatens to push him off the bridge if he doesn't. Meanwhile, Junhee is practicing how to jump the rope, even though her ankle injury is making it nearly impossible. Myung-gi comes over to encourage her to give it a try, but Junhee snaps at him, accusing him of killing Hyunju, the woman who'd saved both her and her baby. Myung-gi insists it wasn't his intention, it was an accident. He claims he was just trying to protect them both and says he wants them all to escape together and be happy like a family. He pleads with her to let him help, but Junhee points out how bad her ankle injury is and asks if he seriously plans to carry her across. She also mentions that her baby's already on the other side and that she doesn't want Myung-gi anywhere near the child or even to see him herself. Player number 96 starts fighting with Gi-hun, trying to shove him into the abyss. In the middle of the struggle, Gi-hun manages to stab number 96 in the eye and pushes him back onto the bridge. Finally, the swinging rope smacks number 96 and sends him flying into the void, sealing his elimination. Now Gi-hun faces a huge challenge, finding Junhee and getting her safely across the bridge. Junhee gets up and he yells for her to stay where she is while he comes for her. But she shouts back that she doesn't want him to return because it'll only put his life at risk and leave the baby unprotected. Instead, she begs him to take responsibility for raising her child. In that moment, Junhee makes the heartbreaking choice to jump from the top, ending her life instantly. Somewhere else on the island, Kyung-seok and No-yul are trying to escape. Meanwhile, the millionaire bettors talk among themselves, saying it was a smart move to include the baby in the game, although some strongly disagree. The leader argues that the baby will be player 222 in the next round, taking her mother's place. He claims that if the child competes, both the voting and the game itself will be way more exciting. A little while later, two players are arguing about voting for the X option in the next round so they can split a decent amount of cash between everyone. But their conversation gets cut short when the guards show up and announce that only 9 players are left and the prize pot has grown big time. Each player would get over 4 billion won. The players start protesting, insisting there are only 8 of them, but the guards tell them that the baby now counts as an additional player. That leaves Gi-hun trapped in a tight spot with the baby, as the other players start closing in, clearly planning to get rid of her. The guards quickly step in to stop them. Meanwhile, Woo-seok is still locked up. He tells the cop that Captain Park is the head of a criminal organization and that all the evidence is stashed at his house. But the cop looks skeptical, saying the costumes seem kind of childish and that anyone could be hiding cash in suitcases. So Woo-seok shows him a photo of Captain Park standing next to the guy who recruits players for the games. Even so, the cop points out that the recruiter has no criminal record except for one minor charge, while Woo-seok has several on his own record. Faced with that, the cop decides to call Captain Park to tell him what's going on, including Woo-seok's supposed break-in at Park's house. Later on, Captain Park reaches out to another captain who's stationed nearby and tells him they've been exposed. Thinking fast, Woo-seok manages to snatch back the phone the cop had confiscated and calls Jun-ho, spilling everything he knows about Captain Park and what he found at his house. Right then, Jun-ho hears gunshots. It's Captain Park opening fire on people aboard the ship. Jun-ho ducks for cover and grabs a handful of arrows. He fires one and manages to wound Captain Park. Before dying, Park refuses to give up the island's location, but does admit that he once saved Jun-ho's life because someone else ordered him to. Moments later, he dies. Meanwhile, on the eve of the final game, a guard informs the players that they'll be allowed to choose who to eliminate during the competition. There's a minimum of 3 required eliminations, but the group can decide to kill more if they want. This bombshell completely changes the game's dynamics. Players start scheming about who should be taken out first. A sinister alliance forms among 6 of them, agreeing to target Gi-hun, the baby, and Min-soo, who they accuse of being a drug addict. Back on the boat, one of the survivors with Jun-ho hatches a plan to figure out where the island is, knowing there's still time to stop everything. Jun-ho has a theory about its possible location, believing it's exactly the spot Captain Park once insisted was highly unlikely, which makes him think it's precisely where the island might be hiding. Meanwhile, it's discovered that Kyung-seok and No-yul are trying to escape. The leader, fully aware of why No-yul is helping Kyung-seok get away, threatens her directly. Under that intense pressure, No-yul decides to abandon Kyung-seok on the boat and head back to the island, since the leader threatens to harm Kyung-seok's daughter, who's in the hospital battling cancer. Later on, another vote takes place. The majority of votes come from the Circle Group, who overwhelmingly decide to keep the game going. Soon after, Gi-hun is summoned by the leader, who reveals his true identity and hands him a knife, offering him the chance to kill off all the remaining players and walk away as the winner of the game. No-yul managed to make it back into the facility. She slipped in quietly through a vent and crept through the passageways until she reached her superior's room. Meanwhile, in the dorms, all the players were asleep, apparently sedated. In the middle of the eerie silence, Gi-hun was clutching a knife in his hands. He'd been ordered to kill the players while they were defenseless. Under the watchful eye of the leader, Gi-hun stepped forward, heading straight for player 100. He held the blade just inches from his neck, but something inside him froze. Suddenly, a memory slammed into his mind. He remembered the conversation with one of the VIPs right when they handed him the knife. In his head, he saw a violent, bloody vision, himself stabbing the sleeping players one by one. Each strike was more vicious than the last, but then a figure appeared in the middle of the memory. It was Sebyok, player 67 from the previous game. She was there to remind him of who he really was and why he'd come this far. Overcome with emotion, Gi-hun pulled back. Unable to go through with the order, he returned to his spot, visibly shaken. From above, the leader watched him with a mix of disappointment and sorrow. Meanwhile, Noil waited for her superior to leave his room and confronted him with a gun. Taken aback, he asked if she'd come back alone and whether Gyeong-seok was with her, reminding her that her original mission was to bring him back. Noil, without hesitating, declared that her only goal now was to erase all records of player 246. Although the guard agreed, Noel insisted that even the memories had to be wiped out. Under her threat, the guard finally confessed that there was still a printed copy of the record stored in the captain's office, an office only he and the captain could access. Meanwhile, the players were summoned for a new challenge, a higher stakes version of the Squid Game. They had to climb up onto pillars connected by narrow platforms and fight to eliminate each other in rounds. Noel forced the guard to take her to the captain's office. While riding the elevator, he pretended to cooperate at first, but then suddenly attacked her. A fierce fight broke out. Between punches and blows, he stopped her and demanded to know why she was doing all this. She confessed it was for Seok's daughter, who was stuck in the hospital with cancer, and that if Seok died, the girl probably would too. The man fired back, reminding her that she'd left her own daughter behind in order to survive. He admitted he'd chosen her as a guard because she'd crossed the border just like he once did, thinking she was special. But if he'd known her true intentions, he said he would have forced her to compete as a player instead. Then he shared that he too had lost the person he loved most because of kidney failure, something that ironically was plentiful in that place. Right after saying this, he plunged a knife into her abdomen, leaving her badly wounded. He then got a call summoning him to another sector. Mocking No-ul, he promised her a painless death and warned that she'd never be able to use the elevator without the facial recognition from his mask. But then, out of nowhere, the elevator doors slid open. Scattered on the floor were weapons that had fallen during their struggle. Using the last of her strength, No-il grabbed one and fired multiple shots. The guard dropped dead. Up on the platform, the game kicked off. Min-soo, on the brink of collapse from withdrawal, started hallucinating. In the middle of the round, he imagined seeing Thanos hanging off the edge, offering him drugs. Min-soo was about to take them when Thanos' face morphed into Namgyu's. Namgyu looked at him with sorrow and called him out for betraying him and stealing his necklace full of pills. The emotional blow was crushing. Meanwhile, the remaining players were arguing about who to eliminate. A lot of them agreed it should be the baby, who'd been brought back into the game as player 222 after supposedly dying. They claimed it was unfair, saying she couldn't make any decisions and was basically useless. They tried convincing Gi-hun that it didn't make sense to keep protecting her, that the baby was now an orphan and served no purpose. But Myung-gi pushed back. He argued that if they killed the baby, Gi-hun might rebel or try to run off with her, which would force the rest of them to fight each other in the next rounds. Plus, he pointed out that player 125, who was clearly going through withdrawal, posed a much bigger threat. The group started seriously considering that option instead. They closed in on him with a hostile vibe. The player, totally confused, kept apologizing over and over, screaming that he didn't even know what he'd done wrong. In the end, they shoved him with a metal rod. In his final moments, he managed to catch a glimpse of Sami, his original teammate. The VIPs watched the whole thing like it was premium entertainment. Then they decided it was time to get rid of Gi-hun and the baby. They suggested playing the straw game. Whoever drew the shortest straw would have to jump off. Gi-hun, sensing it was a setup, picked his straw from a distance. One of the players moved closer and tried to push him off the platform, but the guy was tied up in a makeshift straitjacket by his buddies, which stopped him from falling. Gi-hun whipped out a knife and slashed the rope restraining him, but in doing so, several players lost their balance and stumbled backward. One nearly fell into the void. Then Gi-hun managed to corner the player who tried to shove him. In the middle of their struggle, he drove the blade into the guy's side, killing him. Meanwhile, Myung-gi, still holding the metal rod, shoved another player off the platform, leaving everyone in shock. He then announced that he was actually on Gi-hun's side. The others accused him of trying to hog the prize money for himself, but he explained that the baby was his daughter. He confessed that he'd wanted to run away with Junhee and raise a family together, but she wouldn't let him. Now all he wanted was to protect his daughter. The group didn't fully buy his story, reminding him that just minutes earlier, he'd been ready to get rid of the baby. Still, they shifted their focus to player 39, beating him unconscious before tossing him off the platform. Gi-hun suggested leaving it up to chance by spinning his knife, which instantly sparked a fight. In the chaos, Myung-gi grabbed another player and hurled him into the void. Gi-hun managed to get his knife back and killed another player. Now there were only 5 left. Player 100 tried to play peacemaker, but when he saw the others closing in on him, he offered up the beaten player as a sacrifice. Without hesitation, Myung-gi threw that guy off too. Time ran out. The final round kicked off. Player 39, on the verge of giving up, stepped toward the edge and announced he couldn't keep sacrificing himself anymore. Myung-gi tried to stop him, but it was too late. The man jumped. The final choice was now harder than ever. Junho and the survivor from the boat manage to capture Kyung-seok, who, in total desperation, begs them to believe he's not on the enemy's side. Junho demands he reveal the location thereafter, and Kyung-seok, offering no resistance, spills it right away. Meanwhile, only Gi-hun, the baby, and Myung-gi remain in the game. Myung-gi and the others tell Gi-hun they have to move on to the next round, but seizing a moment when Gi-hun lets his guard down, Myung-gi suddenly threatens him, demanding he hand over the baby if he wants to stay alive. He hints that otherwise he'll make sure Gi-hun never makes it to the next stage. Gi-hun, standing his ground, asks if Myung-gi even realizes what his plan would mean, that in the next round he'd have to either kill himself or kill the baby. Myung-gi, ice cold, replies that he knows exactly what it means. Outraged, Gi-hun calls him out for being willing to sacrifice his own daughter just to walk away with the money. Meanwhile, we see No-ul burning every document and wiping out any trace connected to the players, but in the middle of doing it, she realizes she's badly wounded. Elsewhere, the leader and the guards have pinpointed the exact location of the boat where Junho and his ally are hiding out. Soon after, Junho's companion is tending to Kyung-seok's wounds. When Junho arrives, he tells them he's contacted the Coast Guard, shared their coordinates, and that rescue should be there in a couple of hours. Back in the game, Gi-hun warns Myung-gi that if he crosses over, he'll have a chance to take him out, but Myung-gi, suspicious as ever, fires back that he's no fool. He knows damn well Gi-hun's real plan is to cross over, kill him, and walk away with the prize. He also throws shade, saying he's not even sure Gi-hun actually won the last time. Gi-hun tries to talk him down, appealing to his word and reminding him of the promise to protect the baby. Then he places the baby on the bridge and steps back, doing exactly what Myung-gi demands. But that's when Myung-gi, determined to get his way, grabs the baby and dangles her off the edge of the tube, using her as a hostage to force Gi-hun to surrender. Unbeknownst to Myung-gi, Gi-hun spots a knife stuck in the body of one of the fallen players and quietly grabs it while Myung-gi's distracted. Right as the bridge starts shifting fully into place, Gi-hun musters all his strength and leaps forward to confront Myung-gi. It's announced that to kick off the final round, someone has to hit the red button. Just then, as the button rises up in the center of the stage, Myung-gi realizes he's cornered. Desperate, he snatches the baby again and threatens Gi-hun. But Gi-hun, moving fast, hurls the knife. Myung-gi loses his grip on the baby, and the two men end up locked in a brutal hand-to-hand fight. In the end, though both of them are left hanging over the abyss, Gi-hun manages to pull himself up and stand victorious. Meanwhile, the Coast Guard arrives at the location of the boat where Junho is hiding, putting the leader and his guards on high alert. Elsewhere, No-ul, drowning in despair, is moments away from taking her own life. But at the very last second, she catches sight of Gi-hun holding the baby on a screen. The leader is also watching Gi-hun closely from another surveillance monitor. Right then, Gi-hun presses the button to kick off the third round. After a few seconds of tense silence, he kisses the baby gently on the forehead, holds her tight, and finally sets her down softly on the ground. With a strong voice, he declares that they're not just racehorses in some spectacle, they're human beings with dignity. Then, without another word, he hurls himself off the high platform, leaving the baby as the sole winner of the game. With the Coast Guard closing in on the island, the leader orders an immediate evacuation. Meanwhile, Junho manages to swim all the way to the facility. When he gets inside, he discovers a timer counting down, realizing the whole place is rigged to blow. The leader approaches Gi-hun's lifeless body, then picks up the baby in his arms. But at that moment, he senses Junho's presence, who's standing there aiming a gun at him. Through sobs and rage, Junho yells at his brother, demanding to know why he did all of this, but instead of answering, the leader bolts and escapes in an elevator. Meanwhile, the guards scatter in total chaos, trying to escape as fast as they can. No-il is still mixed in among them, keeping her cover intact. Soon after, a series of explosions rip through the game's facility, while Junho watches helplessly from a distance as the place goes up in flames. Somewhere else, a mysterious figure sneaks into the room where Gi-hun's prize money was being kept. 6 months later, we find No-ul at an amusement park. There, Kyung-seok is sketching her, completely unaware of who she really is and failing to recognize her. No-ul, who saved his life 6 months ago without revealing her identity, pretends not to know him, smiling as she watches Kyung-seok enjoying time with his daughter. Later, we see No-ul getting ready to leave for China after receiving a call from an investigator telling her there's a chance her daughter, who went missing years earlier, might still be alive. In another moment, Junho meets up with his two old colleagues. Woo-seok has just gotten out after serving 6 months in prison and is trying to piece his life back together after everything that happened. Later, Junho returns home and, to his shock, finds the baby there waiting for him, along with an envelope containing a game card and a debit card loaded with 45 billion won. Meanwhile, the leader shows up at Gi-hun's daughter's house carrying a briefcase. With a somber tone, he tells her it's from her father. He reveals that Gi-hun has passed away and hands her some of his belongings, including the uniform he wore during the game and a debit card. Finally, the leader walks away and, out in the city traffic, spots a recruiter practicing Tai Chi next to a homeless man. When she notices him watching, she gives him a subtle hand signal, bringing the story of Squid Game to its final close.